today I'm joined with Tahn Solo. Thank you so much for joining me.
No worries, no worries. How are we feeling today?
I'm all right. I'm excited. It's nice to be doing another interview, so I'm very excited. How are you feeling about talking all things music, all things life?
I'm feeling really good. Yeah, no, I very rarely get to talk in depth about music, so this is a nice opportunity, I think.
Be very fun. Right, starting off, I need to ask about the name Tarn Solo. Does it have a meaning? Is it a Star Wars reference? A movie buff in me needs to know.
So it didn't start off as a Star Wars
Mhm.
reference. So the Star Wars reference kind of came a little bit afterwards.
Mhm.
So I always say to people, there's a lot less exciting of a story than people think it is. So I think I was 20, 21. For reference, I'm 29 now.
Mhm.
So I was really bored on Facebook one day, and my name is Nathan, and there are four unique letters in the name Nathan. And I was like, I'm really bored. It's like 3 a.m., middle of the night. I'm like, I want to change my name on Facebook. And it's like, what sounds really cool with those four letters? And I was like, Tahn. Tan. Um, so I changed it on Facebook, and I went to a music uni, so I was doing gigs and like meeting people, networking and things like that. And you know when you add people on Facebook and it's kind of like surface level ad, and then you bump into each other on another night out, and they don't really remember the name you introduced them as, but they remember your Facebook name. So like,
Yeah.
oh hey, Tan. Or but what they used to say was tan. I get a lot of tan.
Uh,
Yeah, so it kind of just caught on from there. And what I realized was that I didn't want people to be like tan. I wanted people to be like tan, like Tahn. So what I started doing was, oh, like Han Solo, from Star Wars. But what I realized is that a lot of people say Han Solo. So I was
yeah.
like, yeah. But yeah, no, so the Star Wars reference came afterwards. I do really like Star Wars. Like I am a Star Wars fan. I've got the entire box set of the original movies like on DVD. So it kind of worked out really well. It kind of just caught on because at the time I didn't really I didn't really want to use like my actual name as
Yeah.
an artist name. Uh, much to my mother's despair. She's very proud of my name, and she wants me to be proud of my name too, which I definitely had to grow into being. I didn't really like my name when I was younger. Looking back, it's really silly now because I really love my name.
Hmm.
But it was definitely something that I wanted to have something that was like uh not necessarily separate, but I wanted it to be like a something that people would remember. So I wanted it to be something a little bit obscure, a little bit unique, you know?
Absolutely. And that's the first thing I thought as well when reading it. And then I'd kind of gone through your Instagram and you'd spoken about how it is Tarn, it's not Tan. And I'm an Esme, not an Esme. So I completely
Ah,
get it. I
get
completely
it.
get it. Because people are always
Yeah.
mispronouncing it. And then you kind of get into a circle of being like, do I want to tell them that they're wrong or do I just leave it? But it's good to be able to be like, this is part of who I am, even though it's not necessarily the name you're given, it's part of it. So that's
Mm.
really great.
But that's so interesting that you say that you get a lot of Esme because I read your name and I was like, Esme,
Yeah,
because there's no accent. So I'm like, Esme. Esme
thank
is with an
you.
accent. So Esme is without the accent.
And that is always my reply to them. It's like, doesn't have an accent on it, so it's not Esme.
But I think that's because a lot of like, especially like British people or like English speaking people, they don't really have the concept of like what the accents sound
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
in like speech. So I get it, I guess.
absolutely. So leading on from that, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about what inspires you. So is there anyone around you? Is there music? Is there films? Is there anything else that like really has inspired your music?
Um, I always say to people, so I grew up in quite a musical household. Like my dad's very big into his music. if you go downstairs into like our kitchen area, he's got like a massive shelf, and it's just hundreds and hundreds of vinyl records. They're
That's
all like they're all like reggae dancehall records. These are big like reggae dancehall records, but we've also got like a bunch of like R&B, like hip hop CDs. Um, so I've always been quite surrounded by music. In fact, funny enough, I'm quite sentimental. So my dad has like a whole like speaker system downstairs connected to like his record player. So he plays it out through these massive speakers.
nice.
And one of them blew out a few weeks ago. And I was like, oh no. Like we were both like, oh no, he's got to get new ones. And it was a bit of a it was a bit of a it was a bit of a moment for me just because I spent most of my writing time like writing downstairs on like using those speakers. So it was a bit of a bit of a moment. But in terms of like my songwriting, I like to people watch, so I definitely take a lot of inspiration from like the people and the things that happen around me. I'm truly a child at heart, so a lot of movies, a lot of video games, a lot of cartoons I used to watch. I like to sprinkle that kind of influence in there. Um, it's definitely something that I make a point of. Uh, I feel like it shows, some personality,
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's such a good way of being able to relate to people is when you just have like a little touch of something, then they can go, "Oh, I used to love that when I was younger," or "Oh, I listened to that all the time." And it's so nice to have those little like individual touches, which I think that you do so well.
Mm.
Actually leads on really well to another question I had. So, like just going through your Instagram and watching like your live shows and things, people are constantly praising you on your lyrics, and I think that you're so good at writing things in a really poetic, clever way that also references a lot of other things. So,
Mm.
what sort of lyrics do you think that you're most proud of writing?
Oh, that's a great question.
Thank you.
Um, ooh. I always say that one of my favorite songs is of my first EP, which is called Quantum C.
Hmm.
Because that entire song, even though the subject matter is quite heavy, it's inspired by I don't know if you ever watched Digimon, like back in the day.
I know what it is, but I never
But yeah,
watched.
yeah, yeah. So like lyrically, it was very heavily inspired by that show.
Mhm.
Even the title. So there's an episode in the second season of Digimon that explores one of the characters, Kari. And in Digimon, everybody has like a crest, which is meant to represent a quality that they have that they essentially lose, like as they grow up, and they kind of have to rediscover it
Wow.
to unlock this greater power. And this character Kari, hers is the crest of light, and it has immense power, but it's also incredibly susceptible to darkness. So there's an episode called I think it's actually called the Quantum Sea, and it's basically this episode where she gets sucked into this alternate dimension where these evil looking shadowy figures are trying to make them her queen. And the song is basically about kind of that struggle between falling into darkness or uh, carrying on into the light. It's I always whenever I perform the song, I always say that the song is about having to have certain conversations about something that you don't always want to have.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just want to just live your life, but you know that you're going to have those conversations, and you're probably going to wake up tomorrow and you're probably going to have the same conversation again. And it's that constant tug of war of, I just want to live my life, but also this is a really important part of my life. And obviously I wrote it from the perspective of a Black person, but I think it's easily applicable to things like, being a woman and having to deal with misogyny uh, being having a disability and having to deal with that kind of discrimination and those kind of conversations that surround that as well. But that's probably my favorite one to write. I like to tell people that that's a little Easter egg. It was pretty heavily inspired by Digimon, like the lyrics in that song.
So cool. I think like because obviously you've taken something that's so important to you and something that you've grown up with, and then you've managed to like I think it's so incredible that people can just see things and then take from that whatever resonates with them. And I think that to have something that you've watched when you were younger and you've grown up watching it and it means something to you, to turn that into a story that's about your own experiences and your understanding of other people's experiences is like such an incredible way of songwriting. Like
Mm.
that's really touching story actually. That's like really, really to be able to like hear something like that. Because I feel like when you hear music, you could hear something completely different to what the person who's written it has thought and felt while doing it. So that's such an interesting story. Thank you for
I
sharing.
think that's I thank you. I think that's the most fun part of songwriting is that you can say the same thing in hundreds and hundreds of different ways, and people will interpret them in hundreds and hundreds of different ways. Like I very rarely actually like outside of like shows, I very rarely talk about what the songs are about simply because I like to hear how other people
Yeah,
perceive them as well.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I think songwriting is a really special thing for me, especially because for me, I feel like compared to a lot of my peers, I feel like I started quite late.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been singing, but I started writing songs at uni, so probably about 19, 20, something like that. Which is very different to like a lot of people that are like, oh, I've been writing since I was like 12 or like so when people notice the effort that's put into like this songwriting and things like that, it does make me feel a little bit giddy inside, you know?
That's really great. And I think doing it later on kind of helps then as well because then you've got all these experiences. And I know that if I was, I mean, I tried to write songs when I was 12 and they did not go well. So like I can understand like the feelings you get of wanting to write when you're younger. But I feel like having all this experience, you've been able to do that when you're older and having a better idea of what those feelings meant is a really great way of doing it as well.
Yeah, it's funny because by the time I got to like 16, 17, I'd kind of resigned to the idea of, you know what, I just want to sing. Like someone else can write the songs and I'm fine just singing. And I'm fine being honest about that. That's one thing that I feel like a lot of people don't get about like having songwriters and things like that. There's nothing wrong with having songwriters, but I think the point is to be honest about that you had somebody else writing your songs. Do you know what I mean? There's no point having a bunch of songwriters writing your songs, writing all your hits, and then you don't give those songwriters the credit that they deserve.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was at uni, so I have to credit a woman named Kate Walsh, who I don't know if you've seen the film Anger Songs and Perfect Snogging.
I love Angus Song the Perfect Snogging so much.
So I haven't seen it,
No.
but um, my songwriting teacher in my first year of uni, she has a song in that film somewhere called Your Song.
Oh my God. That's so
Yeah, so there's
cool.
a so there's a song in that movie called Your Song, and it's a gorgeous song. Like I recommend everybody listen to it.
Yeah.
And she happened to be my songwriting teacher in my first year at uni, and she made a point of making it a really safe space for you to just try new things. So every week we would meet up. I think it was like Mondays. Like every Monday we would meet up in the classroom, like me and my classmates, and she would go through like uh some like standard like songwriting skills, things to practice, things like that. And then she'd do that for maybe about 20 minutes. And she'd say, right, okay, everybody go away and write something. And we had the choice to write with people. We could write by ourselves. We could pick up a guitar. I remember there was one time I wrote a song. Never. I'm not a gifted instrumentalist. So I picked up a guitar and I was like, do you know what? I don't know anything about this, but I'm going to use this to figure something out. I've always naturally had quite a good musical ear, and I always say that if you don't have the best theory knowledge, that having a good ear is always really helpful,
Yeah.
because it can kind of pick up where you fall short in terms of your theory. Um, and I was like, do you know what? I've got a good ear. I can go and I can figure something out. And I wrote a really cool song. I think it was based on a poem. I think that week we she gave us like newspaper clippings.
Oh,
And we had to like it was either newspaper clippings or like poetry or like poems, and we had to like use those to write the songs. And it was a good song. I should find it at some point
you
and
need
see
to
if I can
find it.
find
We need to hear it.
it. Because I remember at the end of the class, like I definitely recorded it. It might be in my like private
Mhm.
files on SoundCloud or something like that. Um, but yeah, so I'd kind of so that was really the moment when I was like, okay, maybe like I can like write songs for
Yeah,
myself. You know what I mean?
that's such a cool experience. And having that freedom as well to be like, I can give you my ideas and my input, but ultimately you're the people who create it. And understanding that as a songwriter is obviously so special for her to give you as well. So that's so cool.
Yeah, I'll always have love for her. I haven't seen her since like that class, but like anyhow that I can get in contact with her, I'm just like, thank you so much, you
Yeah.
know?
Amazing.
Because
You.
I probably wouldn't be the writer that I am if I didn't have that class.
Wow. That's such an incredible opportunity that you got there and then you've taken that lesson to help you write your music. That's incredible.
Mm,
So, kind of all these questions are leading into each other. This is great.
I
So the
love
next
that.
thing I wanted to speak to you about actually was about collaboration. So,
Mm.
obviously, you work for a lot of people. There's always something going on your Instagram and things of people, or you're just working with loads of different people, which I think is such a refreshing thing to see. And having artists build each other up and do these collaborations where no one's against each other. It's just like I like what you do and you like what I do, so let's put it together and let's just have a play around. And I think that's such a special part of music. I also saw that you work with the Fellowship Music Collective, which I thought was such a cool thing.
Yes,
Like
that
such
was
an
so much
incredible
fun.
program. And I actually just wanted to ask you a little bit about how you feel working with a big group is. Like, what have you learned from working with such different people with such different talents?
So the work that I did with the Fellowship Collective, shout out to my friend Afia for bringing me in on that one, who also makes amazing music. I am Afia. And that was the first time I'd done any kind of like facilitation kind of role. Uh, but she reached out to me and was like, "Oh, we're gonna do this little songwriting workshop. How would you feel about doing it?" And I was a bit hesitant at first because I was just like, you know, imposter syndrome always gets you.
Yeah.
But I had a great time, and I think it was important for me to do that because I think what I learned was not only how to kind of guide people, guide people that perhaps need a little bit of guidance in that way, but also how to listen to people's needs and things like that. Because when you're in a group like that, especially at that age, so it was 14, the youngest ones were like 14 and the oldest
Wow.
two were like 18. Um, and they all come from different backgrounds, listening to different music, and they all play different instruments. So it was definitely a lesson in learning to listen, which I always say is really important, just in general, especially when making music. I always say to people, it's really important when you're collaborating with people how well you listen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was very different in a sense of you're now you're now guiding other people as opposed to like it being like a collaborative. So you're kind of guiding people into collaboration with each other
Yeah.
as opposed to like you having to do it yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And like there were some bits where I was like, okay, this dynamic isn't working, but
Mhm.
if I come in now and I offer this suggestion, this will make everything a lot more cohesive
Yeah.
it'll make everything flow a lot nicer. Like in terms of things like I think some of them had trouble with like finding like hooks and like structuring like where they wanted to put
Mhm.
different parts of the songs. And I was like, you know, I think this would be a really good idea, like to do it like this. Or I think that it'd be really nice if you did like a little bit solo here, or you know what I mean? And that's something that I always consider for myself. I've never considered like suggesting it for like other people.
Yeah.
So when you're in a group where that's kind of what they want you to do, that was a bit of an adjustment, which was quite nice. I don't know if any of that answered the question though.
No, yeah, that was perfect. And I think like, linking back to the question before as well, like you were so impacted by someone who used their own experience and their musical talent
Mm,
to help you. So for you to then be in a position where you're giving your like advice to people, especially younger artists as well, that must have been such a cool experience. And I do get what you mean with like imposter syndrome. It does, I think sometimes when you
mm,
take that on and you're like, okay, so I have to tell people what to do, it kind of makes you feel a bit like, oh God, but it's such a cool experience. And knowing that these people who are younger than you can look up to you and be like, wow, that actually really helped. And you've said something that has impacted
mm.
their music. It must be such a cool experience to be part of.
It definitely felt like a full circle moment, which is kind of the reason why in the end I did say yes, because I was like, I would love to be able to do what Kate did for me for like a bunch of other like kids that age. Do you know what I mean?
That's pretty,
So it was definitely a special few days that I had.
that's so incredible. So, um, I was doing some research before our interview and I was just having a
Mhm.
little ponder on the internet and I actually found an interview that no, it wasn't an interview, it was an article that was written about your first EP by
Yes,
IndustryMe. So someone, another writer had
yes,
written
yes, yes.
Tortoise Territory like 3 years ago, which is crazy. And
That is quite insane.
I was thinking about it and I was like, this is also kind of like a full circle moment. Even though I didn't write that piece, it's cool now,
Mm,
look, 3 years on, where your EP had just come out, there was an article written about it, and now here we are doing an interview
mm.
talking about that. And I was just wondering how you feel like life and your music has progressed since that point.
Um, it's it's a lot more fun in a sense of um back to what we were saying about collaboration. It's been a lot more collaborative since.
Mhm.
When I did the first EP, it was mostly me and the producers I worked with. So I worked with two producers on that EP. Shout out LC who produced tracks 1 through 4, and then a guy named Motion Hyrule. That's my bro. That's my homie. Both of them, my bros, my homies, and he produced track 5, The Rumor, which is inspired. I always tell people it's inspired by the first season of The Umbrella Academy because I thought that was such a cool show.
Nice.
Um, until the last season, we don't talk about it.
It didn't happen.
But yeah, but it was. I watched the first season and I was like, yeah. But this one, I'm working with a lot more people just in general. So I've done a few songs with amazing, amazing artists. A friend of mine named Doom Cannon. We've got a few songs together. Um, the next project is produced by a guy named Kente Kwame. But we had a few people in to like lay some shout out to Manny on the bass. We had Oscar Ogden on the drums for one of the songs, and it was a lot more like bringing people in and like
Yeah.
I'd love for you to just lay some stuff on this. Whereas with the first EP, it was definitely um everything was kind of done, and I was just like, let's just lay vocals.
Yeah.
So like all the beats were kind of picked, and we were just like, just put vocals on it, and that was a nice experience. Like I enjoyed it because I picked those beats out of a lot of beats. So like they were definitely ones that I wanted as opposed to like ones that you kind of just happen across.
Yeah.
But this one was a bit more this next project's a little bit more tailored. It's a little bit more intentional, I guess, in terms of like the creation of the songs from start to finish. That makes sense.
Very exciting things coming then, it seems.
Definitely.
I'm assuming lots more live shows as well.
Yes, absolutely. I hope so. I definitely want to do something nice for, obviously, I'm working on a project, so I want to do something nice for that because I didn't do anything nice for the first one, and everyone was on my case about
Great.
you aren't gonna do like a launch party, you aren't gonna do like any music videos. I did like no visual things for that first project. I literally just put it out and left it into the world. So I definitely want to do something a little bit special for this one, I think.
Yeah, sounds exciting. Right, we are nearly running out of time, unfortunately. So I want to say thank you so, so much for talking to me. And it's been so eye-opening talking about like the reasons for your songs and what you've got coming up. So I just really, really appreciate you speaking to me very much.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.